What I'm going to do in this video is show you how to configure multi-layer switching. So what I mean by multi-layer switching is configuring this layer 2 switch and layer 3 switch so there's communication between them. And also communication between this layer 3 switch and the rest of this network. So currently with this lab, R1 and R2 and the DC switch, they are already configured. R1 and R2 is the WAN network. And then R2 connects to this DC switch. This is in a data center. That's connected to server 2. So what I'm going to do is with this layer 2 switch, I'm going to configure VLANs and assign them to access ports. And that's based on host 1, host 2, and server 1. And I'm also going to configure a trunk between layer 2 switch and layer 3 switch. And finally, I'm going to configure this layer 3 switch with a routed interface for connectivity to this R1 router. And that'll be a layer 3 link. It's going to be no different from this R1 link to R2. First thing I'll do is select layer 2 switch, CLI. I'm going to start with host 1. That'll be configured for VLAN 10. The switch port is FA01. So interface FA01. It's going to be an access port, not a trunk. Then I'll up arrow. Just edit this. I'll do switch port access VLAN 10. So that's configured for VLAN 10, that host. And you notice the VLAN is created automatically. Next one is FA11. That goes to host 2. Up arrow again. And up arrow again. So it's switch port mode access. This time it's going to be VLAN 11. Then there's server 1. That's going to be in VLAN 12. And that's connected to FA21. So I'll just edit this for Fast Ethernet 2.1. Switch port mode access. And that'll be VLAN 12. So that's all done. So when this is all configured, I'm going to test to make sure host 1 and host 2 can connect to server 1 and also server 2. And they're all in different subnets. So next thing I'll do is configure a trunk between the layer 2 switch and layer 3 switch. And that's on FA31 of layer 2 switch. So we'll go back up here, up arrow, change this to 3.1. And switch port mode trunk. The other thing I want to do is just allow VLAN 10, 11, and 12 across that trunk. So I'll use a range from 10 to 12. This is done for security reasons. You only want the VLANs that should be permitted across the trunk. That's done. We'll just do copy run to start. Make sure this is saved. Now I'm going to go to the layer 3 switch. What I want to do there is configure a trunk at FA01, since this is going to be a trunk link between these two switches. Then also the routed interface on FA04. And also I'm going to configure R1, this FA20. This is going to be the link to the layer 3 switch. So there it is, FA01. That'll be the trunk. So I'm also going to allow the same VLANs. They have to match. Switch port trunk allowed VLAN 10 through 12. So what I'll do is go up one level. Now what I want to do is enable IP routing on the layer 3 switch. That's just the command IP routing. Next thing I want to do is configure VLAN interfaces for all 3 VLANs on this layer 3 switch. And the reason is because they serve as default gateways. So all hosts in any VLAN need a default gateway. So what you would do is configure VLAN interfaces on a layer 3 switch. Or if you had the host directly connected to a router, for example, and that's an older method of doing it, then the default gateway would be the LAN interface FA20. That's not this current topology. So the layer 3 switches will have these VLAN interfaces, or what's called SVIs, and they will be the default gateways for those VLANs. That provides this layer 2 to layer 3 transition, where now the VLANs actually have some presence in the routing table, since each VLAN is a separate subnet. So VLAN 10, for instance, that's 172.16.10 subnet. And VLAN 11 is 172.16.11 subnet, so /24. And VLAN 12, server 1, is 172.16.12 subnet. For VLAN 10, I'll go interface VLAN 10. This is the interface. I'll assign an IP address, 172.16.10.254. I'll assign it to the last IP address available. It's a good practice. And there's the /24 subnet mask. So IP address 172.16.10.254. Then I'll do a no shut. What I can do now is up arrow. I'll change this to interface VLAN 11. Up arrow again. This time I'll just edit this for 11. 172.16.11.254. And this will be the default gateway for host 2, VLAN 11. The no shut. And finally VLAN 12. Change that to a 12. That's all there is to it. And then a no shut. Now the SVIs are done. Now next thing I want to do is configure this routed interface FA04. That'll be the layer 3 interface between the layer 3 switch and R1. So what I'll do is interface FA04, then no switch port. That changes the switch port to a routed port. So now I can assign an IP address. So I'm going to just assign IP address 172.16.1.1 and a /24 subnet mask. And do a no shut. Now we'll go to R1 and configure this FA20 interface. So it's interface FA20. Right there, FA20. An IP address 172.16.1.2. And a no shut. So this is 172.16.1.2. This is 172.16.1.1, and FA04. And the last thing I want to do on the layer 3 switch is configure a default route to R1. So anything that derives from any of these VLANs will be forwarded automatically to R1. So just some basic routing. That's all I'm doing with this lab. So this default route is IP route everything to 172.16.1.2. That's the interface FA20 on R1 that I just configured. So that's done. Copy run to start. Now the last thing I need to do is configure the default gateways. That's on host 1, host 2, and server 1. We'll just go here, go to desktop. And for default gateway, 172.16.10.254. And that's the VLAN interface I configured on the layer 3 switch, or what's called an SVI. So that's done. We'll just go to host 2 now, do the same thing. Default gateway, 172.16.11.254. and finally server 1. That's a default gateway for VLAN 12. So that's server 1. That's the default gateway. So that's all done. Now I can do some testing and verify the lab. And to test this lab, I'm going to ping from host 1 to server 1 and server 2, and host 2 to server 1 and server 2. Server 1 address is 172.16.12.1. Select host 1 and desktop command prompt. So server 1 is 12.1, 172.16.12.1. That's working okay. I'll just do it again to get all 4 replies. So that's working fine. So host 1 can ping server 1. That's host 1 to server 1. Now I'm going to go host 1 to server 2, 172.16.3.1. So there it is there, apply. The off is why there's timeouts. So I'll try it again. This time I get all 4 replies. So that's working okay, 172.16.3.1. So host 1 has layer 3 connectivity over to server 2. Now we'll go to host 2 and ping server 1. That's 172.16.12.1. And it's working fine. Now I'll ping from host 2 to server 2. And that's 172.16.3.1. And it's got connectivity as well. So that verifies there is layer 3 connectivity from host 1 and host 2, server 1 and server 2. And that concludes the video.